Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, whatever the day is, June 10th, 2019 council work session. And I just want to point out that I'm altering the order of business. You have a new agenda. If we have time, we'll get to committee reports and items of interest at the end. I just want to make sure we have ample time for this conversation today because it's an important one. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy.
Thank you, Mayor. Christy Hammond, Assistant City Manager. I'm joined at the table today by Police Chief Skinner. And I will be going through some pretty quick material just to update you on the changes with the ordinance. But before, I just wanted to share a thought that I was having over the weekend. I was remembering vividly the two council goal sessions that you had in February 2018, in which you identified a number of really important topics and identified 3 areas of focus: homelessness, housing, and public safety. And one of the things that really jumped out to me as I was thinking about that in the context of the community safety work that was done is that there's a huge intersection between those topics and the livability and well-being and safety of our community. And so I just want to really say it's pretty impressive, all the work that's happening in all of those areas, and the intersect between them and the synergy to keep all of them moving forward is really critical. With respect to public safety, there were a couple of things that you guys asked about. One was hiring a new chief, and the other was developing a community safety plan that included an implementation strategy. I'm proud to say today that we have a chief, an outstanding chief, quite frankly, that has been here over a year, and honestly, I hit the ground running and has been really committed to finding a solution to the problem that we're trying to solve. And you received a plan that was well thought out and balanced, and today you have an opportunity to act on implementing a payroll tax in this discussion to address the $23.6 million annual gap for community safeties and the strategies that have been proposed. So with that, I provided a sheet at your table, and it captures the major revisions. So you might recall that on May 8th, you received an overview of the draft payroll tax ordinance. That ordinance included a .004 rate for employees, .002 rate for minimum wage earners, a .002 rate for businesses, as well as several accountability factors that included the addition of an audit by an independent auditor, formation of a community safety or a community team of advisors to do annual reviews, as well as some other strategic ideas. So today, and then you directed the city manager to send that to a public hearing. That public hearing was held on May 28th. You received feedback. And since that time, we've taken that feedback along with what we've heard from you and revised the ordinance to reflect some of that feedback. So on the sheet that you have in front of you, there are a few areas that I really want to focus on, and those are the major things. There were basically 2 categories of changes. One of them had to do with, sort of the cleanup things that were feedback that we received from the Department of Revenue. There were some adjustments that we made to some cross-references that were in there. And so those were kind of the minor tweak changes. And in Attachment A, you have all of those available to look at. The next set of changes are really the uncodified changes, and that's where I'm going to focus our attention today. So in Section 3 of the ordinance, so if you look at Attachment A, page 12, the ordinance in Section 3, there's a revision to further clarify that the council will use the payroll tax revenues to supplement, not replace, funding used in fiscal year 18 for community safety services. Section 5, also on that same page, is a revision to specify that the fiscal year 27 comprehensive report will include an analysis of the economic impacts of the payroll tax on businesses in the city. The second change in Section 5 is revisions to specify that fiscal year 27 comprehensive report will include an analysis of progress made toward achieving the following system outcomes: to increase the number of minutes per hour that officers are available for community policing, to reduce the number of calls for service per day to which no city personnel are dispatched to respond, and to reduce the number of minutes it takes city personnel to respond to non-emergency requests for services. And what I'll say about these is you've heard the chief talk a lot about the impact of those on the community and their desire to make great strides in improving that. In addition to the 3 that are listed here, we anticipate there will be other metrics and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, but these are the 3 areas of focus. In addition, the last section 6, the place where we want to talk about is a revision that in 7 years, the city council must refer the payroll tax to the voters in order for the tax to continue. If not referred by the council or not approved by the voters, the payroll tax ends in 2028. And so that's a change from that 7-year look that we talked about previously with a review, a more extensive review. And lastly, attachment C in your packet includes a resolution for referring a charter amendment. And the charter amendment states, any payroll tax imposed by the city is capped at .0020 on total wages paid by employers and .0040 on wages earned by employees. Revenues from a payroll tax imposed by the city may only be used to fund community safety services and the administration of the tax. So that's a lot of clarity around the direction of those dollars, and it's that capping charter that we talked about previously, but we didn't have a lot of discussion about it last time. So the purpose of the proposed charter amendment is to allow the voters to cap the payroll tax and limit the use of payroll tax revenues to funding of community safety services. And if approved by the voters, the charter amendment would prohibit any increase to the payroll tax rates above .0020 for employers and .0040 for employees, or any use of the payroll tax for reasons other than community safety services or tax administrations without voters amending the charter. So that's a little bit of that lockbox with the capping and also the clarity around how the dollars will be used. On the back of that document, there are 2 suggested motions for your considerations today. The first is to move to adopt Attachment B. Attachment B is the ordinance that doesn't have the track changes notations in it. An ordinance to fund community safety services with the payroll tax and adding new sections to the Eugene Code 1971. The second motion is moved to adopt Attachment C, a resolution calling for a city election on November 5th, 2019, for the purpose of referring to the legal electors of the city of Eugene a charter amendment that caps the rate and limits the use of the city's payroll tax. And those are the substantive changes that we wanted to point out to you today, and we'll be happy to answer questions that you have about any of the changes that have been included. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, that is great. I already have Mike in the queue, so Mike, I'm going to let you take it away.
I sense that from what I read, both here at the table and from emails earlier, at least 2 or 3 of us have amendments to this. I have the ones that I mentioned. I didn't write them out and send them, but I mentioned them last time we spoke about this. I think that by the time we get done amending this and having a discussion, which I'm looking forward to having, where we will end up will be challenging. And I want to be clear, I believe we have to spend this money on public safety. I believe that what the chief has laid out isn't just a good plan. It's absolutely necessary for our city to do this. And so I have to say that I also believe that this manner of paying for what we must do cannot sustain public support. We've all gotten emails from folks, and mine's been absolutely slammed, with folks that disagree with this method. And organizations that have mentioned they'll refer this out. I believe them. I believe they're both capable and that they're committed to doing that. And then we will be in a much more difficult position. But I absolutely believe we need to spend that amount of money on public safety. So I would like to do it in a way where it may be a great deal harder for us. It may be harder work that is necessary, but that we do it with a larger share of public support. I would personally recommend, and I won't make any motions until we've all talked about it, I'll jump in later, I guess, I would recommend that we strongly consider referring this out, but here's the narrative for how I would present that. We absolutely have to spend this amount of money on public safety to fix it, or at least to get it right. And this is a way we think, because we worked on it, is a more fair way to do this. And if the public's with us, and I don't believe there's been a time when they're more with the idea of investing in public safety, then they'll support it. And if not, we have to work a little harder and find another way. But I don't believe we can pay tens of millions for a brand new city hall and ask people to do this new tax. I believe one is more important than the other. I believe public safety is vastly more important than a new city hall. And this is the thing we have to do. The referral would simply be, we think this is the best way to pay for it. What do you guys think? And if they don't agree, then we keep at it and we work harder and we find a better way. And I have several solutions, but I think there may be more. Put me in for a second round, Mayor, if you would.
Anybody else ready for comments? Quiet? Well,
I guess so.
go for it. Ready?
I agree with Mike that this will be put to a vote by, whether we put it to a vote or not, it will go to a vote if we pass it, and it will fail if we leave it the way it is. And I personally cannot vote for it with the low-income people paying part of it. If we would make it everyone below $25 an hour is exempt, then I would consider it. But it is too hard on people who are barely living, barely have enough money to live, to ask them to pay some more. I think that there may be other methods of paying, but this one, if it taxes people who are barely living, barely making enough to live, I cannot vote for it. And I think there's a lot of opposition. I do believe that ESSM will get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, and it will fail. And this thing about 7 years from now, what would we do if it fails? You have to put it to the vote, and it fails. What do you do then? Lay off everybody who was hired suddenly, or what? I don't think that makes much sense to say you'll put it on the ballot in 7 years from now. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else ready to comment? Council Chris, go for it.
I agree with Mike. We absolutely need to spend this money. We have studied it, and we know that this is an essential thing in order to increase not just the police, but also other services as well. The ticket that goes with that is large. There is no way around the fact that this is a big ticket. You can't do a bake sale and get to what we need to get to. You can't do little teeny increments. We'll add a nickel here, a dime there, and we'll get to $26 million. It's just not possible. We spent months looking at revenue options. What could we cobble together? What could work? What might happen? What might not happen? This was the one that floated to the top. And believe me, as a result of the budget process we've been through in the past, we've looked at these revenues over and over and over again. And we never seem to get anywhere because we always keep running up against, well, the public's not going to want to pay it. And I get that. Whatever we propose, people aren't going to want to pay it. There will be an opponent to every solution we offer, whatever it is. Income tax, there will be opponents. Sales tax, there will be opponents. Whatever kind of tax we want to propose, there will be opponents because people simply don't want to pay taxes, and I get that. I understand it. And when we looked at the kind of money that we needed to raise, this was the most practical and viable way to do it. So for me, yes, we need to make this kind of investment in community safety. The question then is not whether or not we need to make the investment. I haven't heard a lot of people say we don't need to do it. I've heard some, but not a lot. But I have yet to hear anybody have a consensus on what is the best way to do it. And we've looked at a lot of options. And I've had people say, well, you just need to cut. You say, okay, what are we going to cut? There is no consensus on what to cut. And can we cut $22 million out of our budget without, once again, creating a problem? I've been here before. And what's frustrating is if we go there again, we just won't solve this problem. We'll just continue to talk about it for another 10 years, wringing our hands over the fact that we can't find a solution that's going to work. This is a solution that will work. People don't like it. I get that. I absolutely get that. But this will work. And as far as the impact on minimum wage earners, we have reduced the rate for them to what I think is a low enough level that they can afford it. They're receiving the benefits of the community safety initiative. Even the little bit that they put in, I think, is reasonable. So I think we need and have the opportunity to act rather than just continuing to talk in circles around this for another 10 years.
Anybody else ready? Claire.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's no disagreement, or at least I don't expect there's disagreement about the need to find sources of revenue to shore up our public safety system. And, you know, as Chris pointed out, this particular revenue choice and option was brought forward after significant vetting by a well-informed group of people, including counselors around this table. There will be no revenue approach that's going to be perfectly fair and acceptable to everyone. It just does not exist. I did ask the city manager, and you've got that at your at the table, to prepare a motion to amend the ordinance from how it currently sits to provide an exemption from the tax for people earning $15 an hour or less. So that's above minimum wage. This is closer to a minimum wage. So that would modulate, in order to get the same amount of revenue out of the tax, that would modulate the tax for other people a tiny, tiny bit higher, incrementally higher. You know, I was a minimum wage employee in this town. I struggled financially. But even then, I would have been in favor in contributing some of my hard-earned hourly income to improving public safety, given what is going on in our community today. This council has seen the data. We've saw it from Director James. We've seen it from this chief. We've basically had a status quo public safety budget up until maybe just last year, and our population has grown, and our need for more public safety has grown with that increase in population. And I feel like we are falling down on the job. So while I understand we might face a ballot challenge if we don't refer it to the ballot ourselves, I feel like this council has a responsibility to step up and make a hard decision to pass this tax. I think it's significant that the chamber, a body full of businesses that will pay this tax, unanimously supported this proposal with some caveats, with some suggestions for referring it to the ballot after it's had a chance to prove itself, after the chief has had a chance to prove that his strategy is going to improve those metrics that we've discussed. I think that's significant and not something that should be ignored.
Thank you. Anybody else ready to speak? I will just add my comments here, which is that as this council has considered this and this proposal has been imagined and envisioned, the idea is that it's broad and shallow, that there are broad positive impacts across the community in this investment, and the tax on any individual is very shallow. And I will say that for a minimum wage worker, we're saying $2 a paycheck. And I think to be able to get, someone to respond in a timely way when you have a property crime or a trespass or any other livability crime in our community, across the community, that's a bearable tax to pay for a community which I believe we've never experienced, actually, a community in which we had robust enough public safety. And so in some ways, I think it's hard even to imagine it, and the value of the check-in in 7 years of the citizen review panel and the check-in is that we get to see, are we actually getting this better community that we're aiming for? And I think we will see that. And so I think that, I think the council should be proud of the work you have done to date on this. Proud, we have I think, extraordinary moment with a very committed and talented and visionary police chief. And I think you should be proud of it and be prepared to go out to the community to really advocate for this and present it accurately, because I think much of what I've heard in the community is not a completely accurate understanding or assessment of what this payroll tax will do. So I encourage you to have confidence in the work that you have done. Emily.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. It said it will not replace the money in the 2018 budget. Is that money still going to be in every future budget, or is it going to then later take the place of it?
No, the intent is that it will still be in the future budget. So, for example, in the current budget, even apart from the bridge, there's over $1 million of CAHOOTS money that's in the current budget, and that will just continue on, as well as other kinds of things.
Then we have a chunk in the budget that just goes to police already, so that will stay the same.
Yeah, just so in the regular general fund, there's a portion of that currently funds police, some currently funds
Right.
other kinds
So
of
that'll
things.
stay the
Those will
same.
just continue on. This will be added capacity, not replace that.
The games in 2021, we're going to need an enormous amount of security. Who pays for that? Are we responsible for it? If so, how much? And if so, how much would this tax be going to game security?
So as you can imagine, we're in the midst of the planning phases for our security footprint. We've done this before. This will be my first opportunity, but we've done this before with the Olympic trials and hosting those. One of the challenges that we have in fully understanding our security footprint is we don't even have a physical venue that we can take a look at to see what it's going to take to secure. And so we're going off of schematics, doing our best guess. It has been my experience through some of the preliminary conversations is that the overtime dollars used to hire security will be a somewhat offset, but I can't tell you, Counselor, for sure if it's a fully recoverable cost until we really build out the security footprint.
And what I could say is, in the past, the event has paid for those security costs. I'm thinking about the Olympic trials, for example, the event has contributed and paid for those security costs. And so we don't have an agreement yet with 2021, but our intent will also be that the event, of course, contributes their appropriate share for security as well as any other costs.
But it is up to us to provide the security, which is going to take an enormous amount of FTE to plan and implement.
Interestingly enough, as massive of an event as this is going to be, the part of the security that will be so intimately a part of is actually the venue security. As the venue becomes fully developed, we'll have a better perspective on what that is, but there has been no indication for me that there is somehow some massive lift above and beyond what we've done in the past for the Olympic trials, just because of where some different people are being housed. And so we've got some people that have done this before that are engaged in this dialogue. We've got a fairly good preliminary plan, but there's nothing to indicate that it's a double or triple effort compared to what we've done in the past.
I heard that for the Olympic trials, there was an enormous amount of security for potential terrorism, which adds a lot more of a responsibility than just like a football game or a track meet. So what's the opinion on that?
So until we're a little bit too far away before Homeland Security is going to weigh in on what they see this event being classified as. But so it's just too early for me to be able to speak to any kind of threat assessment or threat analysis that we have at this point.
I'm really concerned about the vote in 7 years. I mean, I get it. It's a good chance to see, does this work? What's the reaction? But if people are feeling it doesn't work and then we just go from 23 million to 0, that's going to be just really, really bad. So I don't know if we can, address that at all, but, and I don't want to take the time to make an alternative plan before it goes to a vote, but I just see that not looking ahead to that is just hugely problematic for me. I really would like us to have more disclosure of the proposed budget for this. I think it's confusing to people to see 62 cents for police and not know what that means exactly. And then on the other end, I hear from a lot of people who are concerned that we're spending so much money on public safety and not on homelessness. And I'm not saying I know what the balance should be, but I do want to remind people that this is just a small part of what we would be spending on homelessness. And so maybe we should be grateful that we got anything out of it. And it doesn't mean it will be all of it. And I don't say that lightly. But yeah, I'd like to know both for all of the things, more of a breakdown. What does this go to? I mean, not to how many paper clips, but really, and a lot of people don't know what a CSO is. I think we need to have a little more education, whether we wait to vote on this or we go forward with it now. But I see that as a source of a lot of confusion. If it gets referred and passes, we won't make our deadline, so that's going to also cost us money. And if it doesn't pass, then it's going to cost us even more money. So it's a big challenge. Thank you.
Okay, Greg.
Well, I'm just going to talk just to some degree anecdotally about what I've seen from a personal standpoint in police response. A couple of years ago, I had an incident or a growing incident on in my neighborhood, which I had to call for police response. And because it was a low-level call or deemed a low-level call, and I called the non-emergency number, I didn't get response. I called the non-emergency number 3 times on this particular situation. It was out-of-control party. The second time that it happened, this out-of-control situation escalated. And eventually had to call 911 in order to get a response. By that time, there were, 60, 70 teenagers on my street. When the police came in, they found drugs and guns and other kinds of situations that I won't go into in this particular residence. That was extremely dangerous for the entire community. We've been in a chronic state of underfunding, undersupporting our criminal justice system, our public safety system for years. And now the bill is coming due. And I think that we are obliged as a body to respond in a way that we should protect the safety of the public. And the only way that we're going to do that is by funding public safety. This isn't just about police. It's also about fire. It's also about 911. It's also about what we do in some other areas in terms of, our court system. We have holes all over the ship, and we don't have enough fingers to plug those holes. And so we really need to be serious about responding to what our community needs, because low-level crime becomes medium-level crime, becomes dangerous very, very quickly. And the people who are involved in antisocial behavior know where our weaknesses are. And they're going to skirt right up to the line, then they're going to go over the line, and they understand that we're not capable of responding. And that's a bad situation to be in. And I don't want to be responsible for endangering the public welfare any more than we already have. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Okay. Anybody else for a first round, and then I'll give you a second round. Alan, do you need a first round?
In a minute.
In a minute? Jennifer, first round? You're good? Okay, can I go to a second round until you're ready? All right.
No, just wait.
What?
Yes.
Okay, I've got Mike and Claire and Greg. Did you want a second? Okay.
I agree with a lot of what Greg just said, and I agree with the mayor. I'd like to advocate for this too, because I agree. I think that the community is in a place ready to deal with this in a way that it hasn't been in a very, very long time, and that's a good thing. And I don't think there are that many people that disagree that we need to spend this amount of money. I think that that is absolutely something that most people in our community see, and as Chris identified, they just don't agree how. And for me, one of the problems is with our process, because we only deal with issues in isolation. We deal with the discussion around an issue and a potential solution in a vacuum without connecting the dots to some of the other things that we do at this table from time to time. I don't think we do that very well, and it's our process. I don't think the community has that problem. I think the community sees more of a whole of what we do than each of the issues in isolation, and thus they don't understand why we would do this but not do that, or do this and not do the other thing. Why would you know, we have, if you count reserve for revenue shortfall, almost $20 million sitting in reserve. And I don't know anybody in the community that knows that doesn't think you have plenty of money, and it isn't the same, and I get it. And with respect to my friend, the options were not studied thoroughly. Not as thoroughly as I would have liked that. I suggested it at the time multiple times. One of the solutions that I recommended, the study background work was prepared by Jim Hill, and he retired from the city 6 years ago. The facts presented are not the facts today. And it's easy enough to figure out what the numbers should have been by calling the county assessor and asking how much money goes from special districts that are collected from those within the UGB and not in the city of Eugene. And we'd know what the total pot of money was and what was possible with that option. My point is, I believe there are other options, and the challenge that I'm having with this is that we absolutely need to do it. It's like we've run out of money and we still have a bunch of bills for the month. But instead of deciding to work overtime, we're going to the payday lender. And I just think it's not a healthy approach to this, because we're going to end up, after we shave off the who pays and who doesn't, to less than half the people who live here paying for it. And I don't think it'll be a broad application of everybody contributing. But if Alan makes his motion, number 2, I'll support that. We have to do this. And if we agree to send it to the people, I'll advocate at the top of my lungs, we have to do this. And this is our best idea of what we'd like you to agree or not agree on. And if not, we'll go back to work and find a better way, but we're going to find a way to do it. Thank you.
Okay, Claire.
Thanks. So just a couple of things. You know, I'm not surprised that we've gotten a lot of opposition to the tax. People don't like taxes. People don't want to be taxed. But I have to say, I found some of the comments in opposition that we received to be confusing. I didn't quite know what to do. Some people testified that they had called for police services and police didn't come, and therefore we should not pass this tax. So that seems counterintuitive to me. We also heard from people who are against it because it includes an increase for services to address homelessness, even though that's only 10% of the proposed tax. But they didn't want any of it if even that small amount was going to go to help people who were experiencing homelessness. So, it's hard to kind of sift through all of that and find a through line. And that's why I keep coming back to the things that, this council saw at work sessions, which are public information, which are on our website, about the lack of ability for police to do self-initiated work, to do community policing, to respond to nonviolent calls for service. And I do think although it's contained in the preamble, there are some real details in here that are pretty specific based on a plan developed by our chief in response to what he has determined are the gaps in the public safety system. And to just call a few of those out: a need for more community policing to respond to nonviolent crimes, increased 911 dispatch staff, a department we know has experienced a crisis for many years, increased funding for a municipal court to help ensure that people get their day in court in a timely manner, and increased traffic safety officers, something we have not had dedicated officers for in some time, and something we hear repeatedly both at public forum and in emails, that people want people to get tickets when they run red lights or when they speed, and we simply have not had the capacity to provide that important public safety service. And so, I see that detail here, and I have confidence that this chief is going to implement the tax in the way that is outlined, because if he doesn't, as Councilor Semple pointed out, the funds will eventually go away, and he will have to figure out another plan.
Greg?
I think I'm good, Mayor.
Okay, all right. Alan, are you ready?
Sure.
Go.
I think the need for this is absolutely clear. All of the stories that we hear about the need for more community safety services just make it really clear in my head that this is something we absolutely need to do. And we have underfunded this part of our city services for years, decades, in fact. And I think the work that we've done, we put together the right package of services with police, fire and emergency, municipal court services, and prevention and homelessness services. So it's a good package. It is dominated by police, but that's the biggest need. And I have total confidence in the ability of our staff, the chief and the other chiefs and the other folks that would implement this, and the city manager, in getting this done and making sure that it's done right and that it's effective and that it would work. So I have a lot of confidence in that. I think it's the right amount of money, and I like the payroll tax. We looked at a bunch of different types of options. This one rose to the top. There is no consensus on it in one of these. Everybody has their own opinion. There's probably 169,000 opinions about which one we should go with. There is no perfect tax, but this one actually has one of the earmarks of a perfect tax, which is a tax that somebody else pays, which is the thing I like about this tax is that everybody that uses it pays. So it's not just the citizens of Eugene that are paying for all the people, which is more than half of the people that work in Eugene and benefit from the public safety system that we have don't pay a dime for it. And I think that that's an equitable way to look at it. And I like that it's become more progressive by treating minimum wage earners differently and having the tiered rates. I could support Councilor Syret's exemption for those under $15 an hour. I don't agree with those that say that we shouldn't do this because homelessness services and that crisis is and housing are a higher priority. That falls to me into the we can only do this or we can do that, and it's and it's not we can do this and we can do that. It's this mentality that we've fallen into of the either or, it's an or, and why can't we have a mentality of and? So instead of or, we have and. We can do both. We do 40 roughly services in the city, and when we decide to focus on one of them, and we've done that over the years, last time up was the Parks and Recs system, we don't drop everything and focus and then just fund that. We fund all of it. It's an and system, and it takes all of that for a community to be a good place to live, and I think Eugene is a great place to live. Where I struggle with is whether or not to send it out to voters. And the principle for me is if it's large enough of a tax, this isn't just a simple fee increase. While individually it's a modest amount, it is large enough for me to get over the threshold of suggesting that we should send it out to refer it to the voters.
Okay.
On the second round.
Great. And Chris?
Thanks. To kind of talk a little bit about, where does this come from? And from our standpoint as a council, and I would say it is, and I've always viewed this as absolutely my job, to not operate in a vacuum. In fact, I think it's essential that we consider all the different elements of any decision that we make. It's very easy for someone to come to us on Monday night at the public forum and plead for their specific issue because it's passionate, it's important to them. And I want to hear what they say on their specific passionate issue. But as I like to tell people, I'm spinning 9 plates on sticks, not just one. And if I stop spinning this plate, it's going to fall down. So I have to keep running back and forth, keeping all the plates spinning, and that is my job. And I was elected to study issues in enough detail to understand them and to understand the complex interrelationship between these issues and what they do. And for that reason, I think I've had the opportunity to look at this more closely than somebody who didn't take the time to go to 5 meetings, didn't take the time to read hundreds of pages of information, to look at the figures, someone who doesn't understand the fundamental difference between ongoing money and one-time money. I don't expect them to. That's not their job. It's my job. And it's my job to know it and to know it cold. And I work very hard and to try to do that. And I know the difference between ongoing money and one-time money. And I know that this requires ongoing money because it's a commitment. And it's an ongoing commitment, and therefore you have to find a source of money that's there year after year. I wouldn't use my credit card to pay my mortgage. But I will use a job because I know I'm going to get that paycheck week after week after week after week, not just one time. And I think this is the same kind of thing. If you want to pay that mortgage, and to me, public safety is as important as your mortgage. It's something you really need to do fundamentally, and you got to find an ongoing source of money to pay for it, not just write a check out of your savings and call it good. And I believe we, as a council, have been elected to study these issues in sufficient detail to be able to connect the dots and know what we need to do on behalf of the public. And I think we have done that, and I think we've done it in great detail. And we may make amendments, and I think that's great. I love hearing the amendments because they're a result of people having perspective about this. But I think ultimately it rests with us to say, how do we put this together into a proposal that reflects our knowledge of all of those plates we have to keep spinning on those sticks. And I think this is the proposal that allows us, in the best way possible, to keep all the plates in as good a shape as they can and not sacrifice one for the sake of another.
Jennifer.
Thank you. I think Chris makes a very good point, but I know that reading the email, something that really stood out to me was how many people were so confused about this tax and the things that went on. And a lot of the comments, their assumptions that they had made were just wrong. And so they were voicing their opinion based on something that was not true. And so, I mean, we know we have a communications problem and we're working on that, but I think that this process has really illustrated to me how serious that communication problem is and how much better informed the community could have been to be able to make more informed feedback to us if they could have understood what we're doing better. I also have concerns about what Emily mentioned about the 7-year vote, and I was wondering if Chief Skinner, I'm sure you've thought about this and how you feel about, because I do have concerns that even if we're successful, that it might create this image in people's minds like, well, our police system is fine. Maybe I don't need to be paying this extra money for it. And you can lose from your success in a situation.
Well, thank you for that. It's interesting for me as I think about this. You know, one of my times in law enforcement in a prior city operated on a 5-year operating levy that had to be renewed every 5 years. And realistically is about every 4 years in the event that we weren't successful. And so I understand the importance of getting to yes on something like this if we're able to implement, and then campaigning every single day with our performance so that people understand this is a new normal. I do appreciate the mayor's comment. It reminds me, and I'll use this just as a story, it reminds me of before I had my hip replaced, is I didn't know how much pain I was in until I actually had the surgery. And I'm not sure this community has understood what a robust public safety system feels like with respect to their livability or how well we can perform if we have the adequate amount of resources. So I'm very confident in our ability to create a phased approach to this, to get this fully implemented in a reasonable amount of time, and then live in that space where you get to experience what a community should have in a public safety system. And then at the end of that 7 years, give them a chance to say, does this feel good? Does this feel like the type of Eugene you've always wanted, or not? And so I'm less concerned about the 7-year, maybe because I've had some experience there. I've felt that pressure before, but maybe more importantly, unlike the prior jurisdiction I lived in, the impacts I think we can make with this strategic investment are profound, and can be profound in a very short period of time. And so I am confident in this community's ability to recognize that.
Thank you.
Emily?
Thank you. I'm still concerned about the very, very low income people. And I don't know if any of these numbers can be done on the fly, but if we looked at Betty's idea of exempting to zero, not to 0.01 or 0.03, for people who made less than $25 an hour, how much would we have to increase the rate for people who made more than $100 an hour to offset it? Because that would really help out the low income people. And once you got up to $100 an hour, maybe you could pay 0.06 or 7. And I don't know that I can get that information that quickly, but I'd really like to know what some other scenarios are. We tried really hard to keep it simple. We didn't want to have different rates for everybody because it gets confusing, and you don't want to make cliffs where your raise doesn't help you. And you want to be fair. So people who make more money aren't paying a higher rate, but they're paying more money because they make more. So what if we did change the rates, and what if it was something as wide as 25 and 100? Thanks.
We haven't done that analysis, but we have done analysis to come up with the strategies that we've brought forward. And so what we know is from that $12.01 an hour to $15 an hour, it's about 18,000 in positions, right, in the city. And so as you grow that number to 25, that number expands significantly. We don't have that data. We could definitely do our best to provide you with something, but we know that it would be a significant impact to the employee and or the business rate. We did do some analysis on what it would be if we excluded minimum wage earners, and so we do have some of that information, but I don't know if that's of interest to you.
That would be helpful, too. If we had minimum wage had 0, and then the 0.02 or 0.03, and then the 0.04, help a little bit.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
I just, before I don't think there's anyone else in the queue just yet. I'll give Alan another chance. I just want to respond to that question a little bit with the sort of the cautionary note that once you start shifting the formula a lot, that it also impacts everybody else. And Christy sort of said that, we have a business community that is weighed in on a certain rate, so we shift that up. It may change their perspective on whether they can support this or not. So there's a sweet spot where you get enough support. You're never going to get total support, but if you fool around with it too much at this point, we're sort of back at square one, I think, in terms of kind of building public support for a new proposal. So I would just caution you about how far you try to go in this context, or, you will do it, but it's just my thought that.
I was going to leave business alone.
Yeah, okay, good. But it might not be possible to raise the income if you leave everyone else harmless, and it might not be possible. So we can look at that number. I've got Alan and then Betty.
Yeah, if you look at the analysis that was done for Claire's motion, if you exempt everything $15 or less, what happens is the rate for the employees goes up to .0042 instead of 40, and the employees, everybody else, goes up from .0020 to .0030. So it makes everybody else's go up, which makes sense. And it's within range. But back to my last point before my time ended, which was sending it to the voters. That certainly has risk. I understand that, and it may fail. It's up to us and those that think this is an important thing to make sure that the story is told so that voters can make informed decisions. I understand this is very complicated. The emails show exactly that. Like Jennifer said, how many people are just so misinformed about what this is and what this is, does make that a daunting task. But that's kind of what our job is to communicate that and make sure that it gets across. I understand the notion that putting it in place and letting it prove itself and then vote on it, that has a lot of appeal, but it doesn't really overcome my principle of if it's large enough and significant enough, it should be put out to the voters as taxes and bonds, like we did with the road bonds and we did with the public or the Parks and Rec bonds. As far as the charter amendment is concerned, I can't see how that doesn't end up being a referendum on the tax rather than a housekeeping measure. If it's a referendum on the tax and it goes down, it puts the council in an incredibly awkward position of having to say, interpreting what the voters meant by that. Did they mean that we didn't want any constraints on it? Or did they mean we didn't want the tax? So it'd be very easy to formulate a campaign in that absence with, there's not going to be in the absence of a campaign, because there's not going to be a big campaign around a charter amendment. I just don't see that as generating enough interest to counter a potential other one. So I counsel against going out in November with this type of analysis. I do, however, think we should go out with a vote in November of whether or not we should do this at all. I think that the message is that the need is very clear. I mean, when we did the road tax, we said, what's the campaign? Go drive around. And this one's just as easy. Do you feel safe? No. Well, let's get the community safety system better in shape. And that doesn't come without a price tag. Everything we do has a price tag associated with it. It's a good package. It's the right people. We can do it. I think we have the right folks in place to make sure that it happens and it's successful. But I think that's where we end up going, or should end up going with it.
Betty.
I think the big objection is taxing low-income people. And I think if we did exempt the people who are making below $25 an hour, that the people who are going to refer it to the ballot might not refer it to the ballot. We'd have to ask them, but I think that their concern is for people who really can't afford another fee, who are having trouble getting by as it is. And I think they probably would not refer it. I would, if we vote on putting it on the ballot, I will vote for that, but I don't think it'll pass. Certainly not in its present form. So that just puts us back to nowhere.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I want to gently disagree with my friend Betty.
Well, Mike.
I know you guys are on a roll.
I know, right? This will be voted on by the public, period. It absolutely will be. Either we'll put it to them or it will be put there by virtue of signatures. The same group that gathered 10,000 signatures by convincing people we should have an auditor now just have to say, should we pay? Well, they were participants in that process. Shall we have this extra tax? And they only need 5,000 signatures, 5,300. I don't think it's a question that this will be on the ballot. And if we pass it by force and say, we're just doing it, I think it makes it easier for them to get it on the ballot. I think it makes it much more likely that it goes down. I think if we all say, we're going to need to spend this money to fix public safety, we want to do it, we think this is the way that we want to do it, will you please support it? Then we don't need the amendment for the 7-year charter piece at the end, because the community has already said, yeah, we want to do this. This is how we want to fix this. And I'll advocate for it too. And I'll certainly be in favor of us maintaining it long-term if the people do approve this idea. But then you'll have a solution with broad community support, and we don't need to worry about voting on it again in 7 years, because we'll know. But I think for us to force it right now out of a fear that it might not pass is short-sighted. And I think we should believe in our community more. We have the money to bridge it until November. And once it has that public support, we got to believe in them as much as we want to do this work for the good of our community. I just think it's the wisest way forward, so.
Any other comments before we start putting motions on the table? I would just, I would just add one more thing myself, which is there is a cost to putting it on the ballot. There's a cost partly just in time. There's a cost in momentum. There's a cost in certainty for the chief moving forward of not being able to get started tomorrow, but maybe not get started until the turn of the year. I think there's a factor in there. I do hear the desire to have a stronger mandate from the public and a public that feels well-informed, but I think you have to do that as council, I have to do that as mayor anyway. Either way, we have to inform the public about what we're doing and why we think it's important and why they should be behind it. So you can do it to get it on the ballot with those costs, or you can do it up front right now and just stand by what your decision is. So, yes, Claire.
Sorry, so before we go to any motions, I did want to see if you had the information, Christie, the follow-up to what Councilor Semple asked about if we were to exclude completely, not have a tax on minimum wage employees, and then kept my suggested motion of the people earning above minimum wage but less than $15 an hour. Because, I mean, my motion would already create a tiered system, right? So I don't know if you have the figures on how it would change the tax for everyone else if we excluded minimum wage employees completely.
Yeah, I'm going to let Maurizio come up and talk about that because he's done the analysis in quite a bit of depth.
Hi there, Maurizio from Finance. So we did that previously. If we exempted minimum wage, the impact was about the same. It went from 0.004 to 0.0042. Now this second potential option is another tier. I didn't do the analysis together, but 0.0042 is the minimum wage exemption, and then your piece also brought it up to 0.0042. So one can conceive that 0.0044 would be the combined effect of those two together.
And then if we were to pass, so this would be a question for Catherine, if we were to pass this as amended with exempting minimum wage completely and a different rate for $15 an hour or less, our language in this draft ordinance, the rate wouldn't be correct. So what would that do?
I can revise this for you, so your motion does all of those things, if that is your desired motion to make.
So we're just getting a educated guess on the rate being changed to 0.0044.
Correct. I mean, if you, you have a couple options. There's no motion right now on the table, so you could move to direct the city manager to bring back that information and bring back additional revisions, and we could come back on Wednesday. That's one of the options. I don't know, Maurizio, how, if you suspect that 0.0044 is what you'll see on Wednesday, if you're confident with that, then I can change your motion to accomplish it all this evening, and we can keep moving forward once the motion for the main ordinance gets on the table.
I do have my computer, and I can run some numbers fairly quickly. I have the model set up, so.
Do that. I can do
Yeah,
that.
that'd be great.
Do it.
Ready, set?
Go.
Okay, so where does that, we're
So what we don't have on the table yet, the main ordinance. Once the main ordinance gets put on the table as a motion, the way it needed to be set up based on the various things being amended was Counselor Syra, your motion would need to go first, and then Counselor Zelenka, your motion would go second because you're amending the amendments. If we want to wait until we can get some numbers, we can do, Counselor Zelenka, your other motion first, which would be to amend the ordinance to refer it. Or we can just wait, or we can take a 10-minute
Let's
break.
just take why don't we just take a 10-minute,
Or we can do items of interest, you said you
or
were.
we could do, does that make sense, everyone? I think we should do this in order and get the actual numbers so that we know what we're dealing with before we start jumping in on other motions. So let's just take a pause on this until we get those numbers, and can everyone agile enough to switch gears? Yes, process question, go
So
for it.
can we, before we do that, put all the potential motions out so they can mull them over and make sure that staff can think about them, see if they have any impacts on,
It's about the numbers.
other than
Give us-
these motions?
He's going to let us know if it's a
there any others?
.044.
You could do it with words, I mean.
So the motions that we know about for Claire and Alan, what we sent you is based on our analysis of the impact that those would create.
Right, I was suggesting that if there are any other ones that people had, that other people have said, I think, Mike, you said you might have one, other people might, wanted to get them on the table, Betty,
think there
so
are
that we can think about that as well.
Okay, so, yeah, well, good idea. So why don't we, if other counselors have other motions that they want to put on the table, let's know what the whole array is. Can we
Right,
do
so it
that?
would just be generally at this point,
just-
you're not putting the motions
We're not putting them on the
yet.
table, we're
It's
just,
the ordinance.
Describing it.
we're just describing, yeah,
Alert.
just.
Talking about
so-
them.
Just
talking
talking.
about them, just talking about them. So I've got Mike, Betty, did you have one also? No, Mike and Betty, okay.
My first one will be if Alan's motion number 2 passes, to remove the 7-year revote, because the public will have already voted.
You think that-
The number,
Oh, it's drafted that way. just
Yeah.
Yeah.
for clarity.
all right, I didn't see that part. It is drafted to remove? Got it. Never mind, in the words of Rosanna Dana. The other one, I haven't brought up as a discussion topic yet, other than a few weeks ago, that I don't believe it is fair. I disagree with Alan on this. I don't believe it is fair for people who live outside our urban growth boundary to pay our public safety tax, even if they work here. Much like everyone in those other communities where they may live, in many cases is paying extra for public safety there that meets their community standard. So I will have that motion to exclude those residents who are outside our UGB.
Okay. All right, Betty, did you have all three?
Yes, exempt everyone who makes under $25 an hour.
Right.
And I also want to not have that 7-year vote. I don't think that is a good idea.
All right. Okay, yes.
Just in response to Counselor Clark's comment about exempting people outside of Eugene area, what our finance staff has done some analysis on that, and in year one.
Are we making arguments about that?
No.
Oh, no, I just wanted to provide you some data.
Responding to-
If you don't want it, I mean,
We
I,
have time. We have time to
It
discuss.
seems like a debate, that's what I'm saying.
oh, no, I just was trying to give you some
Some
sense
data.
of magnitude, or like we are with the other topics.
Yeah.
So in year one, the loss of revenue is estimated to be $7.1 million, and then $10.2 million average over the next 10 years by exempting people that aren't Eugene residents. And the employee rate would need to go to .0092 to make up that difference.
And I will just generally throw out, just both as we're thinking about things we want to do to the ordinance, magnitude will matter, both Counselor Taylor for a motion that would exempt everybody 25 and older. Once you start impacting the rate in a significant way, we're going to need to go back out for another public hearing. So when you're moving things .002, .004, that's fairly, but when you're jumping it up where people would have come out to testify that didn't come out to testify, then we're talking about another public hearing, just so we can, because it's a new proposal at that.
Right. So just to clarify, if we're talking about a rate on employers, it would go up to 0.44, 0.44. Is that a big enough tweak that would require another public hearing?
For employees,
For employees, yeah.
no. That's within the range of what the estimations that we were talking about per month. More of the exempting everybody $25 and under, that would be, create such a larger number for those that are paying it, be something, and we don't have those numbers yet, but it would be something like that. It's a new proposal.
Okay. Hang on, did you have a comment? No? Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to say that in our initial presentations from staff, please help me if I get this wrong, but my recollection was 800 million monthly is payroll of government entities and nonprofits. No, it was like one was 350 some million, one was 450 some million, and combined total, it was essentially over a third of the 1.6 billion, 1.8 billion, whatever it was.
Annual payroll numbers that we're looking at based on 2017 data citywide, 3.9 billion. Of that, about 800 million is from public entities.
That's right.
And then about 600 million was nonprofit. So if you add those two
1.4
up,
of the 3 point what?
3.9. So there's
So-
your roughly third that you were looking at.
If we add up to people who make $15 an hour, are we at half the people yet? You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That is essentially a tax on less than half the people.
So up to $15 an hour, roughly looking at 300 million in wages. So that's not close to the 1.4 billion.
But it's added on top, so it's 1.7 of the 3 point what?
3.9.
1.7 to 3.9. We're not quite half, but we're getting there.
But we didn't exempt nonprofit, so that was some numbers. I was trying
But we're
to get back to the number, but yeah.
What was the nonprofit number?
Okay.
600?
It was roughly 600 million, yeah.
So just for some magnitude, so Maurizio, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we had 91,000 jobs, correct?
Right.
And up to people that make $12 an hour, the number of jobs that fall into that category is 18,000, roughly 200, 18,200. In the $12.01 to 15-hour range, it's 17,577 positions. And in the $15.01 to $18 an hour range, that's 12,658. So it's about 48,000 of the 91,000 positions, jobs.
At 25.
If you exempted.
18 would be the cap there.
What was the 15?
The 1201 to 15 is 17,500 jobs. 1501 to $18 an hour is 12,600 jobs.
One is that I was making, if it's still my time, is that we are still exempting a fairly massive chunk of the people of our community. And to say that, and including, according to the numbers of what the real dollars will be, including quite a lot of members of other communities, which for me makes the argument that it's broad-based challenging.
Well, okay. Only if you exempt them all. They're paying now. As written, they're paying. They're just paying.
Yeah, I mean, but by the time we get, my point was, by the time we get to something that we can count to 5 with, I think we're gonna have shooted this to bits.
Yeah, gotcha. Alan, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that at your places, there's a handout that has a couple of motions from me. The second one is about putting on the ballot in November. This is the microphone too. The first one was, other than exempting minimum wage people from this tax, was the effect it had on small business owners. Mainly kind of sole proprietors, 1- and 2-person shops. And what that is intended to do was give them a discount so that they're not paying as much as they would otherwise. It wasn't intended to exempt everybody. It was just intended to give them a discount of 25% on the first $100,000 of your payroll. If you went over $100,000, you'd pay all of it. But if you, for the first $100,000 of payroll, you get a 25% discount. So the small businesses that are struggling are the ones that this would affect, that would try to help.
Okay, do we have a number now?
Yeah, it does appear that .0044 does work to do two things: exempt minimum wage, fully exempt, and also between minimum wage and 15, a reduced rate of .003.
Okay, yes, Claire.
And so that would be how I would intend to modify my motion from what was printed up and put on the table for us.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. So are we ready to put the main motion on the table now? Yes, Eddie?
You want to?
I don't think we're ready.
I don't think it's,
Well,
may I say something first?
yeah, of course.
I think we need more information before we vote. I suggest we postpone the vote. We still don't know what would happen if we exempt everyone under $25 an hour. We got the 18.
We don't have that information. Sounds like you'd have to go out for another public hearing. We
Well,
do know it would be more than half of the people.
this is something that should take some time if we're going to do a significant thing. It's not something we should do quickly. But I'll read the motion if you want me to, okay?
Please.
Doesn't mean I'll vote for it, but I'll read it. Okay, move to adopt attachment B, an ordinance to fund community safety services with a payroll tax and adding new sections to the Eugene Code 1971.
Second.
Okay. Claire, do you want to put
Yeah.
yours?
So I think I can, do you have something?
Yeah,
for me?
if I can get you this,
Well,
just
Deborah-
because I know we're going to have to make it work with what I provided to Alan also.
Okay.
So if you change your number 1 to .044.
Okay.
And then if you add a new number 5 to your list of motions to amend new subsection 4 to make the rate 0. So what that would do is you would add a new subsection, amend new subsection 4 to state, notwithstanding subsection 2 of this section, the tax rate imposed on every minimum wage employee working at an employer located in the city is 0.00 of the employee's wages.
0 divided by 0 equals 0.
There's a song about that, isn't there? Something.
Okay, thank you. So this is a motion to amend. So I move to amend subsection 2 of section 3.724 to increase the overall employee tax rate from .0040 to .0044. Adds a new subsection 3 to section 3.724 that states, notwithstanding subsection 2 of this section, the tax rate imposed on every non-minimum wage employee making a wage of $15 an hour or less working at an employer located in the city is .0030 of the employee's wages. Renumber subsections 3, 4, and 5 of section 2.724 as subsections 4, 5, and 6. Update the cross-reference in the new subsection 6 of section 3.724 and in section 3.726. And amend new subsection 4 to make the rate 0 for employees' wages.
Second.
Minimum
Right,
employee wage.
discussion? Claire, do you need to speak to that?
No, I believe I mean,
You're-
just momentarily, but I think, in terms of the public comment that we did receive, I do think that this was a pretty clear statement about imposing a tax on folks at the lower end of the wage scale. I'm not in support of a motion that would exclude everyone earning $25 or less. I think that's too high a threshold, quite frankly. I do think this is a burden we all need to carry, and I'm willing to exempt minimum wage employees because they are making the minimum wage. And then I think a lower rate for those up to $15 an hour makes sense for similar reasons, and above $15 an hour, that is a livable wage. I understand there are people in the community that are struggling. As I mentioned, I was one of those people in the past, but we all are part of this community together, and we all need to contribute, and I think it's a small amount of money on the $15 an hour and above, between $15 and $25 a month, that a person would be contributing towards ensuring that when they pick up the phone to call 911 and they need some help, somebody will be responding.
Okay. Mike, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I do. I wonder if the staff will remind me whether or not nonprofits are included in this as government entities are.
They're included.
So they will pay it, and their employees will pay it so long as they're making more than $15 an hour. Okay? My challenge with this amendment is that I know everybody has an amendment, well, not everybody, but there are several amendments that many people want to make because they don't like a portion of this, including me. But I think the more of these type of amendments we make, the less broad-based this is. We're getting closer and closer to fewer and fewer people in the community paying, which was supposed to be the rationale. Thank you.
Okay, Alan.
If I got this right, to simplify it, if you pay a minimum wage, $0. If your minimum wage to $15, your rate is .003. And if you're above $15, it's .0044. And the employer rate stays the same.
Okay, everybody clear? Ready for a vote on this? Oh, Emily, sorry.
I like this motion. There's no way we're going to get to please everybody, but it does respond to the very, very many emails we had about our very lowest paid. And there's so many, things we could do wiggling it around, but the committee did feel that it was important for everyone, or as many people as we could have, to contribute. So this is a step away from what the committee had said, but I think we need to respond to what the public is telling us. So I support Claire's amendment.
Okay, did you have a comment?
Yes, I want more information. So at $15 an hour, how much would they be paying?
.003.
I don't, I mean
Dollars?
money. Don't care about
$15.01.
$.
Somebody has it.
So at the rate of .003 at $15 an hour, working full-time, $8 a month.
And that would mean a lot to someone who's only making $15 an hour. Also, I have a question. Then if as the minimum wage goes up, which we hope it will, or I hope it will, then more people would be exempt. Is that correct?
Until it got to 15.
Look at the 15, then no, it'd be.
If it's the minimum wage might go up to 15 in a couple of years.
It goes up about 75 cents every year until fiscal year '23, and then it'll go up by CPI, which is roughly 2.7, 2.9% per year, so.
We don't know for sure what might happen, though.
What is it right now,
Somebody could decide to make, but anyway, those are my
It's going to be
questions.
$12 an hour upon implementation July fiscal year 2020.
Okay, I will vote against this, even though it's an improvement, it's not enough, so I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. All right, we ready to vote on this motion, to amend? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2, so that passes. That's great. Okay, so now we're back to the main motion, but I am thinking we have another. Alan, do you have something now to put on
Yeah.
the table? Yeah.
my motion actually is on the other rate, which is the employer rate. And if I got this right.
So you will, you would be motion 1A, and it doesn't, because that's the one based on Counselor Surratt's motion passing, and you don't need to make any changes to yours to reflect the change that she made.
Right. Well, this is talking about 1A.
You're 1A,
Right,
you're
if
under
Counselor
1A.
Surratt passed, which did. So this actually would take the employer rate and give a discount to small employers, 1 or 2 employees, on their employer rate of 25%. So I move to amend section 1 of subsection 3.724 to increase the overall employer tax rate from 0.0020 to 0.0021. Add a new section, subsection 2 to section 3.724 that states, notwithstanding subsection 1 of this section, the tax rate imposed on the first $100,000 of wages paid by an employer with 2 or less employees is 0.0015. That reflects the 25% discount. And renumber sections 2 through 6 of section 2.724 as subsections 3 through 7, and update the cross-reference in subsections 4, 5, and 7 of section 3.724 and section 3.726. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
A second?
I'll second.
So one of the things I heard second most to the minimum wage issue was, what about sole proprietors or the person that has, me and my assistant and I have to pay this rate. So what this is really doing is giving them a little bit of a discount. It's not exempting them from it, but it does give an exemption to the very small employers, 1 and 2 employees, and shift that amount to all the other employers, but it only goes up to from 0.002 to 0.0021. So what's that? 1/100th of a cent?
Okay. All right. Betty, you want to speak to that?
Thank you. I think Mike was before me, but that's okay.
Got him now.
You're nice change.
It's okay. It sounds good, but I can see people saying, well, we can't give raises because our payroll would be too big and we'll have to pay more taxes. That's all.
Okay. Mike?
I get the point of what you're trying to do, and I understand, and, I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I just don't think it'll actually work that way. And when you're conflating number of employees with rate per employee, there's an inlaid assumption there that I don't think I think there's an awful lot more 1 or 2 person companies that do consulting and make 6 figures, and an awful lot of nonprofits and small businesses with 6, 8, 10 employees that are going to pay the higher rate, and those folks make an awful lot less money per person. So because they're conflated this way, I don't honestly think it's going to work out the way you're intending. I get your intention. I just don't think it's going to work with this formula.
Okay, Claire.
Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect way to get at the issue. And so I don't totally disagree with Councilor Clark's comments, but I would prefer this approach of trying to address to exempting that first 100,000 of wages for a 1 or 2 person employer over the idea of, something that's been mentioned, which is the exempting nonprofits. I work for a nonprofit. It's a statewide union. It can afford to pay this tax. Peace Health is a nonprofit. It can afford to pay this tax. So the moniker, well, they have got a University District Hospital right downtown. Nonprofit piece doesn't necessarily comport to small struggling business. But so I can support this amendment for the intention. It may not get to all of the relief that it's hoping to, but it will get to some.
Okay. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think maybe, I wish I understood it. So my questions for Alan is I don't quite understand what you're getting here. So I want to, if I owned a business myself and I paid myself wages, and I made $100,000, one, that would make me so happy because that's so much more than I make at my nonprofit. So why would I need this break? It doesn't seem like, that doesn't make sense to me. So maybe you can explain why this sole proprietor who's making $100,000, which is just wages, I am assuming that doesn't include if you make profit and you put it back into your business. So I don't understand why they need this break.
So, can I respond?
Please.
So, maybe helpful, do you know how many 1 and 2 employers there are, or businesses there are? How many employees that accounts for?
Yeah, so the data we got from the Oregon Employment Department, up to 2 employees, there's 3,200 establishments in Eugene. I will note that does not include self-employed. That is one area we've been asking around and having trouble getting any good, reliable data about. So 3,200 does not include self-employed.
There's a bunch of people that are self-employed, one-person shops.
Right, and the one other piece of data I have, those 3,200 establishments represent just over 3,000 employees, so it's an average of 1 or so.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, actually it is. So so this is not an exemption for all of their payroll associated with a small business. For small businesses that have $100,000 or less with 1 or 2 employees, they get a 25% discount on the rate that they pay. Everything they make above that, they pay the same rate as everybody else, the 0.0021. So what this does in effect is try to give a little bit of a discount, a little bit of a break to those that are sole proprietors in the $100,000 or less category. So if you have 2 people and one was making 60, one was making 35, you'd be in that category. And so not to try to burden that small business on just that first portion of their income. So if you had $1 million payroll and you had 2 people, you'd pay 99% of this. You'd just get that 25% discount on the first 100,000.
And is this also to reflect so they're paying both, the employer and employee,
0.6.
right?
No.
No, so they're just
That's
going to pay
why.
this one rate and then up to,
Right, if they're sole proprietors, then they just pay the employer rate,
Right, and
not the employee rate.
the ordinance refers to them as the independent contractors, and it's defined by state statute, but they're defined as an employer.
Right.
independent contractors would pay both.
So
No.
No, they're not.
you just pay one of the, right. So that was the intent here, was that because they don't pay the employee tax, they only pay the employer tax, that they would not get that break.
Oh, that is in the other one.
Right.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, Mike, you had one.
Yeah, S corps, under that, pay both or one? Because they're both.
So what we intend to do, the definitions were pulled. We largely tried to mirror how the state transit tax works, as well as the LTD and Metro tax, because we've kind of married the two together to come up with the payroll tax here. So there's a lot of state statutes that's brought in. To the extent there's some lack of clarity around some of these definitions, like S corps, where do they fall and all that good stuff.
But they're the majority, S corps and LLCs are the majority of those 1 and 2 person shops. So this is the majority we're talking about. How much are they paying? Both or one?
If they're paying one,
Which one?
they're paying the employer tax.
Okay. The other thing I would,
You'd be 0.6.
yeah, I'm not sure we're clear enough on that to vote on it right now, but that's another matter. Claire had a really good point. It helped me to understand this. As I thought I understood this, this is not paid by the employer side of everybody who does business in Eugene. It's paid by those employers who are headquartered in Eugene. Do I have that correct?
They have a physical location inside the Eugene city limits.
How much of a physical location?
Well, you're either in,
Well, that's a relevant thing. Some people have a tiny little executive office. Is that it?
if that's their primary resident or their business address, then yes, they would be
I would
subject
think
to the
there's an
tax.
awful lot of folks that's the case. How about folks who have their office in their home and they have an LLC?
That's in Eugene.
Okay. If someone were to rent an executive suite office in Springfield and list that for tax purposes and otherwise as their primary residence, would they still be paying or no?
If they're working outside of the Eugene city limits and their office is located, then they do not pay.
Anybody wants to sell an office building,
If they're working in the city,
If they're working in the city, they would pay. Yeah, if they're
But if-
working in the city of Eugene.
But if you're a sole proprietor, my point is, and you can operate out of a tiny little office, why in the world wouldn't you rent it in Springfield? Anyway.
Okay, so you have one more comment, or are we ready to vote on this?
Yeah, I was trying to do something for small business owners, simple, without getting overly complicated. It's not perfect. But it does try to get at that small business owner and try to give them a little bit of a break. It's only the first $100,000, not all of everybody. So rich people still pay the same, the higher rate, actually a little bit higher, 0.21 instead of 0.20. And it's not that many people. It's probably 3,000 people plus some sole proprietors. So we're talking less than 10,000 people that might be exempt. The fact that they only pay the employer portion of this means that anything we do on the employer rate doesn't affect them. So this is trying to carve out a little bit of that. As to Betty's point, that it only would affect, with regard to raises, if you were at $99,500 of payroll and you were going to go over the 100,000, you would still pay the exact same amount, except for the amount that you went over. Say you went over $1,000, you'd pay the higher rate. So you'd still have an incentive to give people a raise. It wouldn't take that incentive away at all.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Let's vote on this, and then I'm going to ask for a motion to extend by 10 minutes so we can get to the final thing, the last 2 rounds here, or 3. Okay, everyone ready to vote? All in favor of this motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2, and that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, can I have a quick motion to extend by 10 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Excellent. Okay, so now we have another motion from Alan.
Yeah, this motion is to, what I was talking about before. I think that it's part of our responsibility to put this on the ballot. Whether or not it gets or initiative petition. Referrals when we put it on the ballot, initiative petitions when other people put it on the ballot. So whether or not an initiative is put forward or not, I still think we should put this out for a vote in the November 2019 ballot. So I move to delete the last 2 sentences of Section 6 and add a new Section 9 that states, this ordinance shall take effect only if approved by voters at the November 5th, 2019 election. In such an event, the ordinance shall be effective upon the mayor's proclamation under Section 2.986 of the Eugene Code 1971 that the measure passed.
Second?
Okay, do we need any further discussion on this? All right.
I'm not ready to
You're not ready to vote on this? Well, it's seconded, so,
I just feel like we should talk about it a little bit more. There's so many pluses and minuses. Can I just
yeah,
take my
absolutely.
turn?
Yeah.
You know, we have responded to the worries about the lower income people, which I think was one of the pushes for us to take it to a vote. My concern with the vote, and if it happens, it happens, but if it doesn't, we save the money, we save the time, we save the campaigning against each other. And I know nobody likes taxes, and whichever way we vote, we're going to get trouble for it. But I also agree that we were elected to make hard decisions, and I think that this is one of those times. We've looked very diligently at other choices. The need is there, and yes, we can argue about how much of the need and other things, but I think the majority of the people do want to have better public safety, And if we do it now, we don't miss our deadline, which means we would actually save some money. So yes, I like to have the people vote. In this case, I think we should just do it. Thanks.
Mike, you want to come?
Yeah, I would just say to my friend that we do have the money. We do have the money to bridge this between the end of the time it's already funded for and the November election. We have enough money in reserve to be able to do that. And
We could spend on something else.
fair enough, that's absolutely true. But I would suggest that one of the things we're going to face is I don't think there's any doubt that this gets referred out, that this becomes an initiative referral. And it will be twice as hard to pass that way as it will be this way. If we refer it out, it stands a much higher chance of passing where we can explain it, we have the time to do it, and we trusted people to make the decision in their own best interest. I think if it gets referred and it's only 5,000 signatures, it will absolutely fail no matter what we do.
Okay, yeah, Claire and then Betty.
Sorry, Betty. Betty had her hand up before me. So I appreciate Councilor Semple's comments. I agree. I worry that we're going to jeopardize the current strategies we have in place and some of the momentum we have now in terms of improving our public safety. I think we've tried to be responsive in these motions, and we've passed them successfully. So we've amended the ordinance, we've completely exempted minimum wage employees, and we've lowered the rate for people between the minimum wage and $15 an hour. So, I feel like that's being responsive. The other public comment we had was, don't pass this. And I think this council believes that it's important that it is adopted, and if we feel that it's important, then we should do it.
Thank you. Betty?
I don't think we've changed it enough, not nearly enough. And if the people vote for it, okay. But I will vote to put it on the ballot if we don't change it so that I think it's more fair than it is now.
Okay, ready? All in favor of the motion to amend this to put it on the ballot? All in favor? 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Thank you very much. And now we are ready to go back to the main motion as amended. All right? How do we read that?
Yeah,
How do we
review.
And how do we read that?
It's, all of the motions that you have passed are in writing.
Yeah.
They've been in front of you, and so you have, what you're voting on is the ordinance as amended.
It's already on the table.
Yes, that's right. It's already, do we have
It's on
to
the
put it?
table.
It's already on the table.
already
on the table.
As amended.
And it's-
With a second.
And it's already been seconded. And do you want to speak to it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I tried to put this on the ballot in November, but that failed. So I believe that this is a very important thing for the council to do, and I respect the majority of the council. I've often been on the losing end of a vote and then supported the motion in the end because I think it's important for the council to send a more unified message. So with that in mind, while I don't like everything in this, I do like what we did with the amendments. I'm sad we didn't, not referring it, but I will support the motion as amended.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 1, 2, and it passes. Thank you very much. And with that, oh, we have one more.
If there is a,
Where are you going,
if
Chief?
there is a desire to refer,
Dance, I think.
if there is a desire to refer the charter amendment, this would be the moment to make that motion. If there is not, then there's not. But you have the suggested motion in front of you to refer the charter amendment that would cap the rates. If that, I'll just go ahead and launch. If in fact that motion is made, you're going to be, the resolution that you have in front of you as attachment C, you'd be voting on a resolution that is in fact updated to reflect the motions that you made this evening. So subsections I M, and Section 1 would all be updated to delete the reference to minimum wage employees rates, update the employer tax to 2.1 and the employee tax to .0044 in those 3 sections.
Okay. You want to put a motion on the
Sure.
table?
Move to adopt Attachment C, a resolution calling a city election on November 5th, 2019, for the purpose of referring to the legal electors of the city of Eugene, a charter amendment that caps the rate and limits the use of the city's payroll tax.
Second.
Any discussion? Alan?
For the reasons stated before, I'm going to vote no on this, but I hope we can make it be a housekeeping election and not a referral on the referendum on the tax itself.
Any other comments, questions? All right, all in favor of the charter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed, 2, and that passes. Thank you very much. That was a lot of work and a great conversation. And we are adjourned for 20 minutes.